Hello, chemists. Michele Glass here. Thank you for sticking with me as we work through this chemistry material together. Our last video was all about the ionic bond, which was a transfer of electrons. And this video is all about covalent bonds, which is just another way of completing that valence shell. So covalent bond can complete the valence shell by sharing electrons, and that's the key word. So in this case, we will draw our molecules, our atoms, as if that valence shell sort of touches or overlaps to indicate that sharing. Now, when we share stuff, we can share stuff equally or unequally. And so our covalent bonds, we have two categories. We have what's called the nonpolar covalent bond, and then we have what's called the polar covalent bond. And I like to describe my nonpolar as like an equal share, and I like to think about my polar as an unequal share. Then when we think about something that's polar, think of like a magnet, and you have, or a battery, think of like a battery maybe, where you have like positive end and a negative end, or a magnet, or the planet Earth. And so anytime you have like opposite ends, you have polarity. So in the case of the polar, we're going to see here that you have regions with opposite charges, opposite, and we're going to call them slight charges because there will be some sharing of those electrons. And when we talk about a nonpolar molecule, that means it's the same all the way around. There's no top, no bottom, there's no positive end and negative end. And so here we can think about it as being like balanced across. Another way of saying that a nonpolar molecule is equally sharing electrons is to say it has the same electronegativity. So this term electronegativity is talking about the attraction of those electrons for that nucleus, for those positive protons. Now, when we talk about nonpolar molecules, we often see this between atoms of the same element. So if we were to draw hydrogen, hydrogen has atomic number of 1, so that tells us 1 proton. But notice it has atomic mass of 1, so that means it does not have a neutron. So it's a little bit strange. It's the only one like that. And then it has a single electron. So this is an atom of hydrogen. Clearly, it's reactive. So one of the easiest ways for hydrogen to fill its shell would be to make a covalent bond with another hydrogen. And what will happen here is the electrons of each are shared together. And so the idea here is that those electrons are equally orbiting both of those nuclei. The nuclei are the same. The attraction of those electrons for that nuclei would be the same. And so another way of showing this is to do a dashed line. So this represents one pair of shared electrons. And so that's another way that we can write covalent bonds. So if we did carbon bound to 4 hydrogen, we can show it in this way, right? We can also do carbon dioxide gas in this way, where we have carbon and we have 2 oxygen atoms. And notice now we have what's called a double covalent bond. So now we're sharing 2 pair of electrons. Key thing here is that it's balanced across. There's no kind of charges anywhere in a nonpolar molecule. When we look at a polar molecule, we have an unequal sharing. or we can say this as a different electronegativity. So what we're really saying here is that some of these electrons or all of these electrons are more attracted to one nucleus than to the other. Now, water is our classic example of a polar molecule. Water's molecular formula is H2O. So let's draw oxygen. Oxygen has atomic number of 8. So I can put 8 protons in the nucleus, 8 neutrons in the nucleus. And then take a look here. We're going to actually draw it in a slightly different way, because here will be our hydrogen. So this is the classic way that we see a water molecule. Kind of looks like a Mickey Mouse head if I drew it this other way, where I have my oxygen in the center and then my hydrogens as like the Mickey Mouse ears. What we're seeing here is that the electrons that are being shared are way more attracted to that oxygen. That oxygen has an atomic mass of 16 and hydrogen has an atomic mass of 1. So these electrons are like, oh my goodness, I would much rather hang out with that nucleus that has 8 protons. The mass of that nucleus has a greater pull on those electrons. So what we see is most of the time, the electrons are hanging out with oxygen. And so oxygen is going to have a slight, so we use delta symbol, a slight -2 charge, because most of the time oxygen has 8 protons being orbited by 10 electrons. And when that's happening, then the hydrogen is kind of like just a proton for just a minute here. And so it has positive charge. So now we have a molecule that has a positive end and a negative end, right? So we have a difference across the molecule. And it's because the hydrogen is so much smaller compared to the oxygen, that the oxygen is really just like pulling all of those electrons to surround its orbit. Here is the thing that matters, right? Here is what matters. Polar molecules have slight charges. Slight charges. And remember, opposite charges attract. And so now we have a new layer of complexity that comes along with being a polar molecule. And we'll talk more about that in the next video. So stay tuned. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other.